Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas. I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about turning puzzles into player retention tools. So, puzzles aren't just a design choice, they're a powerful driver of player retention. And when done well, they keep players engaged, build trust, and create momentum. But when done poorly, they can frustrate players and cut your game's lifespan short. So, in this episode, we're going to dig into how puzzle design shapes retention through interesting narrative adventures and experimental exploration that turns puzzles into assets that serve your players in meaningful ways. So, that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey, everybody, and we're back. And today with us, I have Ivan Voitovich. Ivan, how's it going? And thanks so much for being here today.
Oh, okay. Thanks for you for this opportunity. I'm very glad to see you and hear.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with Ivan, he's one of the co-founders of Alamed Games. And Ivan, I know you in particular focus on the game and narrative design, and that's like the main hat you're wearing. But please tell me a little bit more about yourself, the studio, and because it's relatively new, right?
Yeah, okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Ivan Voitovich. I'm from Kazakhstan. Yeah, we have our. I'm co-founder of our mid game studio, which under the mentoring program in the game lab of KBTU. Yeah, we are new, a young studio who would like to create a great projects about the puzzles, games, and adventure in the future and right now.
Awesome. And what are some of these games that you got in the mix that are in pipeline that you're currently developing?
For right now, we are developing our main project. It's Illusionary Manor. It's a first-person adventure with puzzle element genre, where you, a young artist, enters the great Illusionary Manor, with a lot of the paintings from around the world. And you are the main point, enter the paintings, change them, and help to the inhabitants of this place.
Oh, that sounds pretty interesting. So it's like this in an illusionary manner, and with all these like different paintings are kind of like in a way the puzzle itself, but part of the immersiveness of the experience. Okay, I like it. Awesome.
Thanks.
And you guys have done some work before. You have this other game too. What's this game? Because I know that you've gotten some traction
It's
from
not
this game too.
just actually a game, it's just a little project
Okay.
with we worked with our professors.
Oh, okay.
It's about a train parable. It's a game. The main point of this to show how the player can be related to the character, understand his story.
Really? So it's almost like the train. It's maybe lack of a better description here, but it's like almost the train itself is somewhat personified or representative of the character.
Yeah, it's a train, so like representative of the story of life of the character, about his what he
Oh,
done in his life, what mistakes he did, what he can change in the future.
that's pretty cool. And you guys showcased this at an event, right?
Yeah, we could probably have.
Yeah. Which conference was it?
Uh, Oh, I need to remember some conference because we show on the a lot of things in our county, on the places
It's hard to keep
in
up
our.
when you're in that circuit so extensively and stuff, especially in your local area. And which sounds pretty cool because, I mean, I don't know much about was it Kazakhstan and everything, but I mean the fact that you have like this really, it sounds like really rich and thriving community in the dev scene is really exciting to hear. So love what I'm hearing on this and everything else. You know, it sounds like that you guys are pretty busy, like fairly recent school grads, getting and go right up into co-founding your own studio and everything else. When you're not busy, like leading or co-leading, I should say, this initiative and stuff. What do you do in your spare time to unwind or relax a little bit?
Spare time. I just try to find the first of all, would like try to find the time for playing some games because
Yes.
it's very important, and we really love this. But actually, we spend a lot of time to develop our game. I think just every day.
Yeah. So when you do have the time, it's to play other games, and then otherwise you're just making your own.
Yeah.
Understand. Understand. So, well, appreciate you sharing a little bit more about yourself in the studio. That said, I would like to have us get to know you a little bit more. And to do that, we're going to have you go through the Q Box round. And, folks, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Q Box round, it's just a few random questions I prepared here today for Ivan. So, Ivan, are you ready for the Q Box round?
Yes.
He is. I could see his image, folks, and I could see he was born ready. So, all right, here we go. First one is, what is your biggest gaming pet peeve?
For me personally, the cutscenes are too long and drawn out. Impossible to skip them and take up a lot of time. I
Oh,
don't really
yes.
like this time because I'm enjoying the gameplay and solving the problems the game poses the most. Even if the story is really cool and the plot is incredible, I can watch it. But there's very high probability that I will miss some cutscene. Skip them because I don't like to spend a lot of time for watching a movie. I just like the games for the opportunity to play them. When I acting something, do the game right for this. Really love these moments.
Yeah, I can agree. I think a lot of us can. It's all a concept of like meaningful cutscenes and stuff, or I don't know. I always think of the best cutscenes I do like, which aren't technically cutscenes, are like Naughty Dog, how they use them. Uh,
Yeah,
but
they have a
yeah, good
perfectly.
yes,
Because I would like to say about this, because my favorite games, I think it's most about the Last of Us first and Uncharted. Uncharted, it's a very
yes.
beautiful example of good cutscenes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yep. And again, it's like you're taking people out of the immersion. I think I felt that way about Final Fantasy 13. We won't talk about that anymore, folks. I'm sorry. But anyways, all right, cool. Next one. What's the most common mistake you see devs or studios make with their games?
Perhaps it's not listening to players, but speaking from personal experience,
Hmm.
this our game project scope.
Ah,
Initially, we planned to develop a simple, small game. Whose goal was to find treasure in mansion and nothing more. But over time, the game's scope expanded from the small project to what we are doing now. We have a lot of the thousands of ideas. It's both great and awesome, but this is where our problem sometimes lies. Our secondary mechanics or ideas related to characters or level design grow so larger that we need to invent new ones and increase development time. So
yeah.
we spend too much time for this, and we don't sleep or in this way. And this leads to the fact that even the things we develop need to be iterated and redone hundreds of times to try to bring them some logical and engaging experience. The one with the team and I want to see. So for us, it's not about being able to say stop when it's absolutely necessary. We just go, yeah, we can do more.
I think that's a key thing that you identified too, because I think we all become subject of that, right? We are like, oh, we know about this, and yet we're gonna do it anyways, and then okay. So sometimes that does happen. Awesome. So all right, next here is, what game are you playing now?
Okay, unfortunately, I haven't played anything for the last month or couple of months, but the last ones I played were Dishonored first and Guardian of the Galaxy. For
Ah,
me, these are very cool projects because I haven't played them before, which I try to highlight important things in design for expanding in our project. With Dishonored, I paid more attention and tried to emphasize the idea of how to properly create a game level design. Because for Dishonored, they have a really cool game design and opportunities which can it do. Because I can use some special things about the teleportation in this way, or I can play in the game without anything in
awesome.
this stuff.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I love how you're like focusing on games that you're like, hey, it's to unwind and to help me, you know, with the project that I'm working on too.
Yeah. If we are talking about the Guardians of the Galaxy, they have the really good opportunity to skip cutscenes. I really like it.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
and they have just a simple story which I could learn by playing the game
Mm.
while interesting gameplay. Corvo.
Awesome. Well, Ivan, really appreciate you sharing, more about yourself and everything through the Q-Box round. And now let's get into, the heart of our conversation, which, folks, as I shared in the intro, is, turning puzzles into player retention tools. And what better, person to discuss this with than someone leading a studio with, on the front of puzzle games being a prime focus. So kind of kick things off here, and for quick context too, I know this as Ivan called out that they are a younger studio. I think this really gives us a really interesting perspective too, as opposed to someone who's been making puzzle games for 40 years or whatever. That perspective is valuable, but it's just as valuable too as like I would think you guys coming into this. So again, to kick things off, I'm curious, like in your guys' opinion and yours, what makes a puzzle memorable enough that players keep coming back or even recommend it to other people?
Mm. Okay, first of all, I would like to say puzzle is a very difficult genre. This is a
Yes,
very
it
cool
is.
question. One we was trying to answer, at least a personal I am. My team, I have played a lot of games to answer this question, including games like Portal, in Antichamber, or Blueprints, this last one. We are highlighting different things across all these projects. Sometimes it's increasing unusual mechanics, visual style, or a story part, probably from the portal, like it's Gladys talking to you or just set up for this. For our project, we want it to be memorable primarily for the ability to enter the paintings and interact with the world and the color mechanics, and for players to learn more about the artist and their work. Secondary is about the plot and the main character's backstory, and perhaps also some non-player characters, like the drunk Owo in our game. We had her as a local meme at the beginning, and she was there for the sake of humor. But now she's a character with her own backstory and certain connection to the main character. I think the good at just find the motivation and things which you would like to see in your game. I think the most interesting for you.
I like that perspective because you guys are, I would say it sounds like you're approaching it in a very holistic manner. And you said something that's really important for me, and especially in a lot of the work that I do. You said identifying what that motivation is, and then you were giving a lot of good examples in terms of other factors of motivation, how the relatedness of things, and then and there's just again, it's taking this kind of it's really interesting how you guys are taking this realistic approach to like what are these different motivations, what are other elements, characterizations, themes, whatever it may be that kind of encompasses this into what I think is always overused these days, an immersive experience. But then it's almost like breaking it down into if I'm interpreting this correctly, breaking it down into what makes an immersive experience. Because we see that word get thrown around so often, but here you are, at least for the games that you guys are creating, let's define what immersive is, at least for our experiences, the ones that we're providing.
Just for us, it's I think it's our motivation. The first of all, it's just create something really great project because we started it suddenly. We don't think we could gonna do this. I mean about the scope of the project,
Mm.
because how I said previously, we would like to create a small project with a simple action, with simple activity in this case. But by step by step, we created something great. We like this idea and we are motivating by the work.
Mm.
Just we are believing our project gonna show the people about the more about the art. We have to, we have things what we can to say for others, and we'd like to do this and show in our country we have the game development teams, we can collaborate with others, we can create the cool stuff for
Yeah.
others.
So, and again, part of that too is like about this whole, as much as everything else as it is about that collaboration that you have and everything else. I'm curious about kind of like going into about like balancing challenges because I know that's a big thing. When you guys are shaping challenges, especially in puzzle games, how do you decide what should test players versus what should guide them forward, or is it a combination of both?
Uh, about the test players. Oh, okay, it's a very good question for me because we don't have provided a lot of test playing session. We just developed something. First of all, we try to test on ourselves how it's working because we share the problem by some simple things. Probably someone of us creating level design in this way, creating idea how it's gonna be look like, or how the third working in this problem, and other develop the system how it's working. But for when we creating this, we can't understand how it's working pretty well. We are sending this for first sessions. So we're creating in the university just for the students.
Nice. So, in terms of when you're testing this, it's really helping you kind of like identify what that progression is like.
Yeah, and find the hiding problems of this.
Mm,
Because we can't understand when we are developing things, no, developing the puzzle system. Because for us, it's obviously clear and understandable what we did and what is the purpose of our puzzle and
right.
how to solve this.
Yeah, and I think that's a key part right there is identifying what is the purpose of the puzzle. And another good way to look at this too is like I don't know, it's kind of would like your thoughts too. Like, there's always this thing about like, oh, what should tutorials be like, right? And maybe that's a good example that relates to this too. Is like a tutorial could be like almost like testing players versus maybe some of the best tutorials, from what I understand, what people say or claim to say is that it shouldn't be like very direct, like, hey, you are in a tutorial right now. It's like the game experience is the tutorial to, get to that point.
Yeah, just enter the year while you're playing, your gameplay must be started more intuitive, gotta be.
Yeah, yes, absolutely key there. And on that same note, I'm just kind of curious, what have you guys seen? And I know you said that you haven't had many opportunities for playtests and stuff, but from experimenting yourselves and going through everything else, has there been anything that you guys seen that kind of tipped you off in terms of like maybe a design choice or something might hurt retention? Is that earlier? Could it be later? I mean, what are the signals that you pick up from of this potentially happening?
How I previously said, we didn't conduct out-of-play testing, but even those that did provided us with wealth of information. One of the most memorable example is the early version of our first puzzle, which we painstakingly through as a team, throwing together ideas about how it should work, what mechanics it should have, what to put around it, what well designed to make it, and just the design. But we obviously didn't see any problem. We simply had a black cube in the middle of the scene, and the mouse cursor did nothing when we hovered over it.
Mm.
This led to the player simply not understanding that the cube was inactive. We decided to fix this by making the cursor black. Yeah, I know it's not a great idea, but it's stranger as it might sound. A black cursor on black background. Yeah, it's very strange. Which also a poor solution and so on. But thanks to this, we understood how to be best create interactive objects. It's better to add an outline to them, make the cursor more not neutral, gray, I think it's. So it doesn't get lost in the other colors. And the same goes for the outline. And this action already helped to ensure the users at least somehow didn't immediately abandon the game and we would not have to tell them. So just iteration and playtesting, we have in this way a lot of things.
Yeah,
By step, we meet it up.
I like how you just shared basically a very, very what we, probably in a lot of people's eyes is a very, very simple and easy fix, but yet this one was like you recalled this experience specifically, and you're already adapting how even something so simple could be applied to lots of different nuances, lots of different like scenarios or situations in terms of how to solve problems about even like what we're talking about, like retention. I just think that's really kind of cool because sometimes we might not take a moment to reflect on something that is so simple and almost like trivial, where you're sharing it here right now, and how like, hey, this is actually informing our process just from something as simple as this.
Yes, because they're hiding the details, how to say it more correctly. And we are young studios, we just new in the game development, and we always meet up with simple things. But
Mm,
I think it's a very important process for growing because we meet up with some problems, meet up with another stuff of the engines, and we learn how to improve this problem,
yeah,
how to solve them.
I love
And
it. It's such, that you define such a really good process there and stuff. And I don't know, sometimes I think some of us could probably, I mean, I honestly think it's a good reminder for myself. Even it's like sometimes it's just that reminder of, sometimes it's about going back to the basics or keeping things simple, or how can you apply simple things to everything else. You said it perfectly. It's really part of that learning experience, and looking at things in such a way. I love it. When it comes to games too, with any games, right? Because there's puzzles, even if it's not a puzzle focused game or genre, let's say, there's still going to be challenges. There's obstacles and puzzles and stuff. You know, how is it that you kind of like weave challenges into a story or into, an experience? So let's say they feel like that it's part of the world, but not just a roadblock or an abrupt thing. Because I know this is probably some of the biggest puzzles. I mean, some of the biggest problems we've seen in games, and how they use puzzles or obstacles.
yeah, how I first foresee we want to make a small project, but as the project grew in size and characters and some narrative structure were added, we had to think about how to make it not just a puzzle for the sake of puzzle,
Mm.
but something more meaningful. Well, at the very last, we came up with a try to puzzle together, or rather, each new group of puzzles would at least solve the hero's personal problems, so they could follow a personal path of development of the character. Another thing is that puzzle should teach the rules of the world where the player lives. New mechanics probably we're gonna add. By the solving the puzzle, we must teach the player how to use them. Also, we might not be doing it right. We come up with the puzzle, spend time designing the mechanics, and only after we satisfied with the result do. I try to tie in the characters, make everything logical, and introduce a plot that will move the hero forward. And that's where most of the difficulty lies. Part of the narrative being written for this may turn on to be unnecessary as over time. It's slightly new puzzle, it will undergo changes. This will force you to rewrite it again and create a coherent story for the gameplay for the game. And the hardest part is logically describing things that were originally done from the perspective of, well, it looks cool, it's beautiful. And when you look at it, the question always arises, how to write what is it? Which again, it risks the problem with narrative and game scoping. No, just personally, I can say it especially annoys me when I spend the night working on the new part of code, then you drive 2 hours to work and come to show team what we have such a cool idea. It will develop the plot, and they tell you, well, it's a little bit crap. Do something new. We change the first part here. We need to make everything logical. But overall, it encourages you to believe that all this scale and create a cool story that may people will like, and you have to say something.
I really like how you just shared and talked about that approach. Like, because the first thing you led in with was, having, let's say, obstacles or puzzles, kind of like that process be tied directly to how is it like developing the character. I love hearing that. Like, that makes so, like, at least for especially for me, like that says so much. Especially, let's talk about maybe quickly like narrative experiences. When puzzles are involved and stuff, I think that some things like that could risk being, like, let's say, roadblocks or too abrupt or whatever. But so in that case, it's like the development of the character, especially if it's some type of narrative, not necessarily narrative heavy, that is so meaningful and impactful. I think it goes back to what you said before about that resonance. Like, what's your process to kind of identify these things? And it's like, well, what are, and again, this overarching idea of retention. Well, what's going to resonate with the player? Does the puzzle itself have meaning or purpose? You said that too, or is it just there for the sake of being there? And leading with the character aspect too is interesting. And then there's that other component you said, like the puzzle being purposeful in the sense of teaching the player, because maybe that's going to be an experience or something they learn how to use later. I think we see this a lot more common in games. Like the first thing that's, as I was saying, this that came to mind was like The Witness, right? You see one form of
Yeah.
puzzle and then leads into another and kind of giving
And the
you.
system developing, but the core is very simple, but how it's developed, it's really good and very nice.
Yeah, right. But again, you ended all that in terms of this whole process as having it be. You really just reiterated what you were sharing before, is that coherent experience, that cohesiveness around this whole thing in terms of how one thing feeds into another and vice versa. And again, that I think it's a big component of what really makes an immersive experience, and not just as a word that we use to try to describe our games, that again constantly is we're inundated with that. So I love that take. I want to kind of get into now maybe some a little bit more on this front, like designing games for player experience, and I mean even going a bit further. So like I'm curious, going deeper, I guess, or broader, or however you want to look at this, have you ever noticed, like, say, a cultural or emotional factors that may change how players respond to the same challenge or even a similar challenge?
We haven't seen this explicitly, but we want any response to our project to be positive and tied more closely to the paintings we'll be showing and presenting this full representation of. We want to show not just the most popular paintings that everyone knows, but also lesser known ones that are known only in the certain countries,
Mm.
perhaps probably from different locations, like paintings by artists from our own country. We wanted to show the stories of their creators, some details of their creative process, how they achieved this, what difficulties they faced, and of course, we want to do all these things through gameplay. Just by playing, you learn a lot of cool stuff.
You know, and I like that too. And I've seen this in a lot of different spaces and games around certain like themes, like let's say ecological related themes, like mindfulness of our habitat and things like that. I've seen that, but this is a good one too. And what you're calling out, and specifically, it's with the project you're working on now, Illusionary Mansion, where you know portraits are a big part of the experience, puzzles, everything else. But what you're calling out too is like, hey, look, we have an opportunity from a culture, and it's interesting. There's like different ways that it can face, right? Cultural. It's like, oh, we're making a game about this particular culture or inspired by this culture, right? And here it's more of like an indirect education around different artists. And if you make a good point, like, oh, we could put all these pictures in, oh, the Mona Lisa or anything else that people are familiar with. But in this case, it's like, I like it too because one, it's gonna feel fresh and new, right? Because okay, maybe people aren't familiar with the artists, well known, historic or even current artists of this country, of this culture. And then you get to learn about it too, and then you get to paint your own narrative as it relates to the story. It's like there's so many cool, interesting factors that are being done here, and I think it's a really creative way to accomplish a lot in one thing, and still make it about the experience and not necessarily an educational experience, but still it's happening inadvertently or organically. It's just really interesting. And what about like, so we got some of the cultural stuff. What about, would you say too, like maybe even emotional factors? Are there things maybe directly associated with these paintings that maybe can trigger some emotional
Uh,
factors, or is that more into like the game design aspect? Like how do you play with
Yeah,
that?
because we will try to create some things which probably some locations from the countries, the peoples from different. When you're gonna see their picture, they're gonna create some associations. Wow, they know about our country, they know our culture, they know these important things, and it's gonna create the positive moments for them.
Mm.
We are believing for this.
Okay, so like so kind of some of these factors, these emotional factors, you're it sounds like you're being, strategic about that too a little bit too, which I think is really interesting. How and that's an important point because I think a lot of times too when we think about games as a whole and designing games, we're not necessarily thinking about how they can work in a strategic way, especially if we're looking at like marketable games. Like how could us putting something in this experience be somewhat strategic and maybe catered from a marketing standpoint and how we share or communicate these things. And it sounds like you guys in a sense are kind of like thinking ahead of like, hey, we got some other plans where we can incorporate these things, how it could like, and what and in some cases it doesn't have to be big scale either. So I like how you're thinking and the team's process around this too, and other ways in that you're using these emotional factors in a much, I would say, broader sense in a way.
Yeah.
So based on that too, I would say, what kind of cues or design choices do you feel help players, let's say, feel smart without being
Oh,
spoon fed? Because I think this is super important, like empowerment, right? That's a key thing to keep that motivation engagement going.
yes, because this question is still a question for us. Well, because we make mistake either by being too complicated or by acting too explicit.
Yeah.
It took us quite some time to understand that the puzzle design is more the harder side of things to during development. The idea is that it's a very interactive process in which the most important thing is how readable the puzzle you're making is. This is a huge problem during the development. This is an idiom in our language that when the artist looks at the painting too much, they stop perceiving the mistakes and the errors. We call it the blurred vision
Mm.
on the brush. So I don't know if we have a similar thing. So during the level and puzzle design, we faced the same problem. Let's say we can spend a lot of time creating a puzzle, staying later in our basement workspace, and what we assemble will seem like a really good idea. We know how to solve it inside and out, and all the actions will seem more logical and correct to us. Just for example, we had transparent glass walls that were moving, blocking some of passages. But it appears that players don't perceive the glass as a wall. They
Mm.
try to break inside, sometimes not seeing the barrier at all, like when you try to enter a store with a glass door. Or from the first problem place, we had a painting that you need to enter the first floor is the most unremarkable, but that is exactly what we wanted in the first time. The mistake was that we had a second floor with a red carpet leading up to it. So everyone to try breakstone on the second floor that don't try to export the first, which was more beautiful itself. So we later decided to move the paintings to the another position on the second floor because everyone skipped this point. So going back to the question, the deal hides in the details. How clearly the players can see the objective? Do they see every piece of the puzzle right way, or is it given to them in small pieces? All these things matter, and importantly, can be balanced just by
Yes.
player tasting and to understand.
As you were sharing that, one thing, a game that came to mind about that, because it's interesting how you share that specific example with like the glass poles and stuff, and it's amazing. It's hard to think sometimes, like even again, some of these simple things don't just give players that sense of empowerment in some cases, and right now for simple things, right? Like simple, easy mistakes. But then in other cases, and the example I was thinking of, because I love this game, is The Last Door. It's a point and click, very gothic, pixelated point and click adventure. And there's, as you're going through trying to solve these puzzles and stuff, there's sometimes you do one thing and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, I remember seeing this, but didn't know I could like interact or do this thing. And then it's like that aha moment where it's really empowering and you feel smart. But it's like it's to a degree, because I think sometimes you're right about balancing, because if you do that too early on and people always get it, like it could lead to, this is too simple. And if it's too simple, it's not challenging enough. And if it's not that, that's how that makes it difficult to retain players.
Yeah, so in this case, we try to develop the games by part of the parts. First, the puzzle or the systems of the puzzle must be the easier to learn how to use this properly new mechanic or this way. And after this, you need to just redo in our game to more complicated to create some aha moments for this.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Now I know I want to go on this topic a little bit further too, where like let's say in cases where there's lots of different variations of puzzles or mechanics and how you're solving them, like I guess it really comes down to a balance. But what would you think of? Let's say it's a much. Let's say, and I don't know how this relates to your specific game, but let's say it's a very long experience, meaning like maybe 10 hours. Let's say 10 hours of gameplay. What would you say are good ways to maybe reintroduce some themes back again, so it's not like so it's still dynamic and fresh in that progress as they're moving forward and advancing.
Yes, it's a good point because you need to recombine your mechanics and use which you used before.
Right.
Because when by you do while you're doing this, it's awaits the opportunity for combinations. And if you learn something, you must reuse this. We
Mm-hmm.
just try to this system because it's create more interesting moments for the player, and he learned this not just for nothing. He learned this, and he can create and use this system in the future.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's definitely it because I've worked on projects before where that's some of the problems that not necessarily puzzle games, but that was a problem. It's like you teach this thing, and then the experience is longer, but then when do I use this again? Because then it's a matter of do I use this combination or something as a preference, or is it a tool that I actually learned and know that I have access to and need to use it again later? It's yeah, it can be challenging, but I think yeah, the combination part is pretty cool too. So sorry, I that was off the cuff, folks. I was just naturally getting really excited about like some of these things too, and I somewhat digress. But anyways, thank you for sharing that too. Now, kind of the last question here before we close here that I'm curious is, where would you see the line is between letting players wrestle with the problem and then knowing it's time to step in and help. And I'm not saying obviously directly you guys step in terms of like an extreme case is okay, I'm going to enable the cheat feature or the hint feature in this game or whatever. But again, I guess it comes down to balance. But when is that right time, or do you avoid it? Like, I guess what's your approach to
Uh,
this type of problem?
okay, at the moment we can only help players in person if they having trouble.
Mm,
Just in the life. And even the not right away, personally I suggest they spend about 10 minutes clearly trying to figure everything out, clicking and interacting, and
mm,
only the simple offer a hint. And if it's exclusively in the gameplay plan, I think a character who should be next to the player should. I mean, just somebody from an NPC, after about 5 minutes, offer some simple advice on where to go or probably what need to do, just help to understand really what actions you can create or where you need to go, not an immediate open answer, but gradually offer advice on what is needed, but in ways that leave the final action up to the player so they feel like they did this themselves. Also, we still have to test this, and we are not for many sleepless nights.
mm. Yeah, but no, that's a good point because it's a challenging thing. Like you could just like have a hint feature, right? But I like the response in particular because it goes back and really relates well to what you identified your guys' processes, right? Because it's like, all right, fine, we have a NPC, and after so many times, but because I think that still keeps you in that moment. It could even add other character development or narrative development too, right? Because it's
Yeah,
like,
it's just a big work of the narrative game design, but we actually try to use another tricks like a light or probably the color, different color
mm,
for the active objects. Just create the more logical things.
yeah, no, that makes sense too. Like, because an easy one is like something textual where it's like, oh, okay, here's my go-to. But then let's say you keep going back to an area and you keep going back, and clearly the game with the systems involved are picking up on, okay, this person's having trouble, and now maybe in the background or something, there's a street light that's flickering all of a sudden, or some other types of cues and visuals. So it's like they're logical based, but they're still there to maybe present some other signal that's further educating and guiding players on steps to do. I didn't ever even think about it that way. That's really cool. Like there's so basically what you're saying, there's lots of ways you can do this to guide people and doing it in a more meaningful and logical sense that doesn't take people out of the moment.
Yeah, it's right. So we try to find the solution for everything. This.
Yeah.
So just we're gonna try find sometimes a new types of solutions. Always we create the bicycle because after we find it in the internet or probably some guidelines and understand. Okay, everyone knows it, but it's our personal experience. We just meet up with this and try to create something new.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I know I'm pushing you a bit too because that's a lot of the stuff you guys are still learning in self. But I don't know. I love how like defined and focused you guys are with your processes that you have in place for these types of things. And you know that's why we're here, right? To talk about it. Well,
Yeah.
I know we're at time here, but before we close, I mean, we definitely dove in a lot on this topic. Are there any like tips, suggestions, or anything that you know would like to share with our listeners today based on what we discussed?
I think I could give you some tips. Probably listen the testers sometimes, not blindly listen them. Just listen the important cases which really important for the game. Just
Mm.
could ruin the experience. Another thing, it's probably gonna be just play games also and cooperate with your teams. Obviously, you need to share this experience and talk with them. What would you like to create?
Awesome. Well, very quick, focused tips there. Absolutely love it. Simple as I wouldn't expect any less from you. Ivan. With all that said, really appreciate you being on the show. And hey, if people want to learn more about the game you're currently working on, Illusionary Mansion, your studio, what are some links, ways that people can reach out and contact you?
Yes, we have our personal website, our Meet Games. You can type it just in the link. So, and we have another types of websites. I think we have a YouTube also, just a little channel we post our teasers, also some elements of the games, and so on. Just visit our website, our Meet Games. You can find everything what you need.
Awesome. Love it. So those links and a few others will be in the show notes. Ivan, I can't thank you enough and appreciate you for being here today. It was a pleasure. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for you for this opportunity. I'm very excited to be here and our team also because they are always with me.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.